Hi, my name is Kathy Wickham, and I'm here today with Joan Phillips, the co-founder of the Animal Lovers League in Glen Cove, and Dr. Thomas Infernuso, a board-certified surgeon who volunteers his time at the shelter. Joan, tell us about Georgie. Where did he come from, and what happened to him?
Georgie came from a large municipal shelter where they could not provide the care that he needed. The police had brought him in. He looked like he had been hit across the legs with a lead pipe. He was totally starved, and his skin was raw with infection and sores.
So Joan, how did your team of volunteers, as well as Dr. Infernuso, come into play in this case?
Well, the first was starting with the first vet who volunteered to come in and look at Georgie, to look at the malnutrition and the skin infections and start him on antibiotics. And then when we got to the point where she realized there was nothing more that could be done, he really needed a super specialist to fix him, then we contacted Dr. Infernuso, who volunteered his services.
Dr. Infernuso, so what was George's condition when you first saw him?
So when I was contacted by Ms. Phillips, the director of the shelter, regarding Georgie, I was not expecting the degree of damage that the patient had. Both bones of the what we call radius and ulna of the antebrachium were actually sticking through the skin. Massive infection, pus coming through the areas where the wounds were, and the dog had been treated with aggressive antibiotic therapy. However, the infection was so severe that the biggest concern was sepsis.
So Joan, with the limited resources that you have at the shelter, where did you have to turn in order to handle a case like this?
Well, the first thing that we needed was a real surgery. We have a small clinic at the shelter, and it was inadequate for the magnitude of this surgery. So we went to the Station Plaza Veterinary Group in Glen Head, and Doctors Ronskevitz and Sullivan very graciously offered their hospital at no charge and their equipment, and they did not have orthopedic equipment. So the Animal Lovers League used money from our kind donors to buy $5,000 worth of orthopedic equipment.
Dr. Infernuso, so after the surgeries, what was required to continue with George's rehabilitation?
He needed to be in a home, and for that matter, we found a foster parent, Susan Bloom, and the future adopter of Georgie, Dina Jaunt and Grimm and Deodor, that offered their help, of course all volunteer work, and that was extremely helpful to the rehabilitation program that Georgie went through.
So Joan, can you tell us where the law comes in to help prevent the abuse that led to George's injuries?
The law is improving by very gradual degrees. In terms of Nassau County, Kathleen Rice, the DA, has started her animal crimes unit. I believe it's 3 years old now. And unfortunately, in Georgie's case, a perpetrator was never found. And it was such a violent instance of abuse that there needs to be laws in place to prevent this for all animals. And there was a bill that was before the legislature of New York State that did not pass this year, so that people can get involved, call their assemblymen and state legislators, and ask that it be passed next year. It takes a lot of the laws out of agriculture and markets and puts them in the criminal sphere of enforcement, which is what we need.
So what do shelters and rescue programs need in order to keep doing this kind of work?
Money. Finances are the biggest problem for rescue groups, shelters, and mostly for cases like Georgie. Georgie is a classic example of a dog that required intense work, months of therapy, multiple operations, and in light of all these donations that were given to us, with the help of the shelter that provided mostly the money to save this poor creature, we're able to do so. So I think money, finances, and body work, volunteer jobs, and that's it.
So joining me now is Susan Bloom, who helped foster Georgie post-surgery, as well as Dean Yoder and Jonathan Grimm, Georgia's now adoptive parents. So Susan, can you tell us how you got involved?
Yes, I've fostered other pets before, and I had stopped into the shelter where I saw Georgie recovering from his surgery, and instantaneously I fell in love with him. He looked very pathetic. He didn't have hair. He just needed, you could see he needed some love. So I offered my home to take care of Georgie.
So Dean and Jonathan, can you describe your experience for us after adopting Georgie?
Well, let's just say it was love at first sight, and Susan, being who she is, she's so open and loving, and we were fascinated by this dog because he had, from what I understood, he had been actually on a sofa, couldn't move, and was absolutely content with his life somehow in these giant casts and bandages, and he never yelped, didn't cry, and he was just loving. And I didn't expect that from a dog as sick and in as much pain as this dog was in. And it was instant love.
Thomas actually instructed me on how to properly change his bandages, which required, because of the infection, a lot of use of sterile gloves and fresh bandages. We did, I think, 2 or 3 bandage changes a day, which with both legs took me almost 2 hours to do each time. So it was a lot of time involved in caring for him. But he was amazing because I would be changing bandages and handling his very sore little legs, and he would fall asleep as I was doing it. So he's been such a trooper through the whole thing.
So in conclusion, I'd like to thank Dr. Thomason Fernuso, Joan Phillips, Dean Yoder, Jonathan Grimm, Georgie, and Susan Bloom. As you can see, there takes a lot of people to rescue one animal. And if you can see yourself at any of these roles, you're much needed.